Let me tell you something that might be uncomfortable to hear. And the fact is that your leadership team is lying to you. Now, not maliciously. They are not sitting there trying to deceive you. But here's the reality. Every time they nod in agreement during your strategy meeting and then walk out and execute five completely different versions of what was agreed, that in itself is a lie. And I see it everywhere. And after working with hundreds of CEOs and executives across different industries, this is the single most common gap I find. And I call it leadership fragmentation. And it is the first gap of the 15 gaps that I consistently identify in leadership teams. By the way, if you are a CEO watching this and you have ever left a meeting thinking, right, we seem to be all aligned, only to discover 3 weeks later that everyone went in a different direction, then I press upon you to stay with me. Because in the next few minutes, I'm going to explain exactly why this happens and more importantly, how to really fix it. So what does leadership fragmentation actually look like in practice? So I want to give you this practical example. There was one particular CEO I was working, and it was a professional service firm. Brilliant guy, strong business, about £10 million turnover. He called a strategy meeting with his 6 senior leaders. They spent a full day together. They agreed on 3 strategic priorities for the year. Everyone shook hands. Everyone said, great session. But here's what happened. 3 months later, I sat down with each of those 6 leaders individually. And here's what I found. Every single one of them described those 3 priorities differently. Not slightly differently, but fundamentally differently. One leader thought the top priority was geographic expansion. Another one thought it was client retention. And a third thought it was launching a new service line. And just to let you know, the CEO himself, he thought it was operational efficiency. Same meeting, same day, same conversations, 6 completely different interpretations. Now that, my dear friends, is what is meant by leadership fragmentation. The alignment is performed in the room, but it is not practiced outside the room. Now, here's what is interesting. Now, these are not people who lack skills. These are experienced, capable senior leaders. So you might be asking, why does this really happen? And here's the thing. It happens because of something I call the agreement illusion. Here is the reality of it. In most leadership meetings, what looks like agreement is actually just the absence of disagreement. People will nod, people will say, sounds good, but nobody actually checks. Do we all mean the same thing by this? Now, I just want you to think about it. When you say we need to focus on growth, what does that mean? To your sales director, it means more pipeline. To your operations director, it means capability. To your finance director, it means margin. To your HR director, it means hiring. Now, they all heard this word growth from you, and they all agreed with it. But they each walked away with a completely different picture of what they were agreeing to. And by the way, this is not a communication problem at all. It is actually a systems problem. Your leadership operating system does not have a mechanism for converting agreement into aligned execution. So what does this really actually cost you? And I want to put some figures here. So just imagine when your leadership team is fragmented, when each leader is executing a slightly different version of the strategy, you start getting three things. First, you get duplicated effort. Two departments working on similar initiatives without knowing it. And by the way, I've seen this waste hundreds of thousands of pounds in a single year. Second, you get conflicting priorities. One leader is investing in a new market while another is pulling resources back to protect the core. They're literally working against each other. And you know what? Nobody realizes it until the quarterly results come in and nothing really adds up. And third, my dear friends, and this is a big one, you get the CEO bottleneck. Because when the team is not aligned, the only person who can referee is going to be you, the CEO. So every decision, every conflict, every ambiguity flows up to the CEO. And suddenly you end up spending 80% of your time managing alignment instead of leading the business. And just to let you know, in my experience, this leadership fragmentation alone is typically responsible for 3 to 5% of trapped margin. So just imagine a 10 million pound business that is going to be about 300,000 to 500,000 pounds of leakage every year quietly. So let's look into what really causes this. And in my experience, it comes down to three root causes. So the first root cause is that no shared language. The leadership team does not have a common framework for describing this strategy. They use different words, different mental models, and different assumptions. And because they never explicitly aligned on what the words mean, they assume they are on the same page when actually they are not. The second root cause is no decisions rights, which means nobody has formally defined who owns which decision. So when the strategy says focus on growth, every leader will interpret that through the lens of their own function because no one has actually told them otherwise. And root cause number 3, meetings that produce agreement but not alignment. And here's the difference. Agreement is, yes, I support this direction. Alignment is, I understand exactly what this means for my area, what I need to do differently, and what success looks like in 90 days. That's clarity. Most leadership meetings produce agreement. Very few produce true alignment. And that gap is where leadership fragmentation lives. By the way, this is why I always say the most dangerous moment in a strategy meeting is when everyone starts agreeing, because that is usually the moment when everyone stops asking the really hard questions. Now, 3 things that I want to share with you, and these are practical, which you can start these tomorrow. So the first thing that you need to do, after every strategic decision, go around the room and ask each leader to say back in their own words what they think was just decided and what it means for their area. And I call this the playback test. If the playback is different from what you intended, you caught the fragmentation before it leaves the room. So you're optimizing the return on time here. The second one is create a 1-page strategy summary. 1 page, not a 40-page strategy document. 1 page that says, here are our 3 priorities. Here is what each one means. Here is who owns each one. And here is how we measure progress. Every leader should be able to recite this from memory. If they cannot, the strategy has not been internalized. It is a document but not a direction. And the third one, build a governance rhythm. A monthly checkpoint where each leader presents their progress against those three priorities, not a free flowing discussion, a structured accountability session. And this is what I call the traction lever in my impact model. Strategy without traction is a wish list. Traction turns alignment into execution. Now, these three steps will not fix everything. They are the start. Leadership fragmentation is one of the 15 gaps which I consistently find, and it rarely exists in isolation. And it's usually connected to weak governance, poor decision rights, and a culture that avoids really true, honest, brutal truth, honest challenge. But if you fix this one gap first, you create the foundation for fixing everything else. And here's the thing, your team is not the problem. The system they are operating in is the problem. And the good news is the system is fixable. Now, if what I have described today sounds familiar, I have two things for you. First, I've created a CEO scorecard. So it's only 5 questions, 60 seconds, but it shows you which dimensions of your leadership operating system need the most attention. And I'll put the link in the description below. And second, if you want the complete picture, I have a free CEO blind spot report that reveals all 15 gaps and how to find them. And that link again is in the description too. So if you found this valuable, please subscribe, because I'm going to be going through all the 15 gaps one by one in this particular series. Each video breaks down a different gap, what it costs, and how to fix it. So, my dear friends, my name is Vijay Mistri. I'm a leadership operating system architect, and my job is to help CEOs like you unlock the potential that is already sitting in your particular business. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Bye for now.